We have a Congress of humans, too often bitterly divided. Now in D.C., there's a Council of Animals, and it is united in its appeal to humans. They say, respect us all. That's next on the PETA Podcast. Welcome to the PETA Podcast. I'm Emil Guillermo, your host for this inside look at animal rights, brought to you by PETA, the largest animal rights organization in the world. On today's episode, the Council of Animals. There's a polar bear, an elephant, a rhinoceros, a chicken, and a coyote. 5 for a tiebreaker. They are larger-than-life works of art, and they are now in session on the National Mall, just a few blocks of what could be called the Council of Humans, the U.S. Congress, too often divided bitterly on human issues. But what of the animals? If the animals spoke in a language we could understand, what would they say about us, to us? And that's why the Council of Animals has arrived. It's here to declare we are all sentient beings on this earth. Can we peacefully coexist and not exploit our fellow animals? Can we see ourselves as one and respect us all? At the July 13th unveiling of the Council of Animals, PETA President Ingrid Newkirk addressed the crowd about the Council and what it stands for.
Yes, hooray. Well, thank you very much for coming out to the launch of PETA's Council for the Animals on the National Mall. This phenomenal sculpture by Quill Hyde is more than a work of art. It's an appeal for us to ponder the vast amount of knowledge we have gained about the other species, even in the last 20 years or so. It's not everybody's cup of tea to be asked to be decent to animals. But this asks us to recognize them as fellow earthlings who may look different on the outside, but who, just like us, have eyes that see, a mind that thinks, and a beating heart. It reminds us that every living being feels pain and hunger and fear and love and joy, and that none of them deserves to wind up as a fur pom-pom on a hat or as a cheese dip. Humans are actively searching for intelligent forms of life in space on other planets, yet intelligent forms of life are all around us right here. We hope that if we find intelligent life out there in space that's more powerful than we are, they will treat us with mercy. Don't all forms of life here on Earth hope the same? Most of us are disturbed by the social blind spots in human history, the mistreatment of others based on differences like color and gender, even mental and physical ability. Now, the Council of Animals allows us to glimpse what future generations may think of our prejudices today. It challenges human supremacism, that narrow view that prevents us from respecting the interests of others just because they are not of our own species. And it asks us to recognize that other species, even ones we're afraid of, or we're not familiar with, or we don't really like, possess awe-inspiring abilities that we can only dream of, diverse ways of communicating that we are not able to interpret, jaw-dropping skills of navigation, and complex emotions that require our respect. Archbishop Desmond Tutu said, "If an elephant stands on a mouse's tail and you remain neutral, you are actually on the side of the oppressor." What if a human stands on an elephant's tail? Trophy hunters like Donald Trump Jr. and his brother haven't only stood on an animal's tail, they've cut it off, and they've stood grinning with it in their hands after gunning down that magnificent being, all to show that they're big men who can dominate nature and animals. We must not remain neutral in the face of such blatant supremacist displays. Lastly, the changing climate is on all our minds. Just here today, We know who has polluted the oceans, cut down the forests, contaminated the soil and the air, and created a crisis that has brought floods and famine and fires and tornadoes to our doorsteps. So human supremacism has to crumble when we realize that all the other species treat the earth, which is our home and theirs, wisely and keep it pristine and livable. Nearly a third of all known vertebrate species across the world are now used or traded by humans. Species are disappearing, and almost all those who still exist are treated simply as ours for the taking. Most have their infants taken from them, like the cow, deprived of her calf, so that we can have dairy yogurt. Have whatever covers their bodies stolen to make into sweaters and shoes, or are forced into servitude of one form or another, like the caged tigers in the circus, or the dogs bred for pet shop sales. This exhibit makes their case. It reminds us who animals are, and it asks us, please, to protect them or simply leave them alone. It asks us to open our hearts and open our minds to the rest of the animal kingdom and put prejudices and bias and meanness aside. So thank you very, very much for coming. I want to recognize Senator Steve Cohen, who is over there. Thank you so much for coming. And Sheila Jackson Lee is in session, but is coming later to say hello. We thank Congressman Padilla, Senator Padilla, and others who have shown. Eleanor Holmes Norton is also stuck there, but sends us her good wishes. And Chuck Schumer walked by last night and said, "I love PETA." So there we are. Thank you very much. After Dr. Alka Chandna gives a talk, we will play Edward James Olmos' recording where he speaks for the coyote and tells us the message of the exhibit. But thank you very much, Dr. Chandna.
Thank you, Ingrid, and good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Alka Chandna, and I serve as Vice President of Laboratory Investigations Cases at PETA. My work is focused on stopping experiments and the exploitation of monkeys, mice, dogs, and other animals in painful and deadly experiments that have no application to the human condition and yet are funded to the tune of more than $20 billion a year by the National Institutes of Health. Experiments like giving copious amounts of alcohol to voles to see if that will make them cheat on their partners. Feeding pregnant monkeys a diet of junk food to see how that will impact their babies. And sewing shut baby monkeys' eyes for a year to see how that will hinder their visual development. While just a few blocks away, lawmakers gather to discuss the problems facing our nation, we are here to discuss the problem of the unique threat that our species poses on all other animals, including treating many of them like living but disposable laboratory tools. The Council of Animals will remain here between the Washington Monument and the Capitol building all summer as a stark reminder that we must learn to live peacefully with the other animals and that their lives, interests, autonomy, and freedom count. Everyone who visits this piece will be invited to sit, reflect, and listen in to a conversation among our fellow animals as the exhibit encourages visitors to think about one very important question. If animals could speak in a language we could understand, what would they say to us? There is one thing we know for certain. They would want to be recognized not for what they are, but who they are. Because whether we have fur, feathers, fins, or skin, we are all animals. We all feel love and pain and loneliness and joy. We are all the same in all the ways that matter. And now I invite you to listen to our council chair, the clever coyote voiced by Academy Award nominated actor Edward James Olmos. Thank you very much.
Dear friends, we are gathered here today to discuss the problem of humanity, a problem we, as other than human beings, have faced for a long time. Look around you. There's the elephant with her profound emotional intelligence, the rhinoceros with his majestic horn, the polar bear with his unmatched resilience, the chicken with her superb mothering instincts, and me, the clever coyote. But our talents, interests, and autonomy are often overlooked because some humans believe other animals exist just for them. This is speciesism, a form of prejudice and bigotry, just like sexism, racism, ageism, or ableism. We must change this rotten belief that despite our complex feelings, interests, needs, and desires, including the wish to be left in peace, somehow our lives don't matter. Humans must recognize that all living, feeling beings have inherent value and deserve consideration, kindness, understanding, and respect. If humans begin to understand us, they might finally acknowledge us as their brothers and sisters on the planet. Do humans know that elephants use a secret form of communication? Elephants use their feet to pick up low-frequency vibrations sent through the ground, so they can understand each other's calls from dozens of miles away. Elephants remember the voices of their deceased family members, and when they come across the remains of a departed loved one, they run their trunks along their bones in mourning. Grieving elephants shed tears at the loss of a family member and even bury their dead. But despite these remarkable qualities, humans force elephants to perform silly tricks in circuses and kill them for their ivory tusks. Do humans know that injured rhinos have been documented coming to them to ask for help after getting caught in barbed wire or being shot? This is part of the rhino's long, amazing history of working across species lines. In Africa, birds perch on rhinos' backs, and whenever they detect danger, they warn their rhino friends by creating a fuss. But not all rhino communication comes in the form of loud trumpets and calls. Rhinos use a complex breathing language, a sort of Morse code, to talk to one another. Yet they are poached and their homes are being destroyed, all because humans fail to share land with others who have lived there for millennia. Do humans know that polar bears have been seen sliding across the ice for the sheer fun of it? Do they know that these animals can travel across ice and sea for hundreds of miles to find food? Despite polar bears' extraordinary abilities, humans are destroying their habitat and causing a climate catastrophe, melting the sea ice that polar bears rely on to survive. We must tell humans that chickens have a bravery gene, which gives them courage. When chicks are still in their shells, their mother clucks softly to them so that they can learn to recognize her voice. Chickens can also recognize human faces, remembering them even after a long time. Yet humans exploit chickens for their flesh and eggs, confining them in cramped, unnatural conditions that cause them suffering, fear, and pain. If we tell humans these things, will they agree that no one should be killed simply to become a bucket of fried body parts in a fleeting moment in a human mouth? And then there's me, Do humans know coyotes form long-term partnerships in which they cuddle, tease each other, build a home, and raise their children together, only parting when one passes away? Yet humans hunt and trap us because they fear us, even when we want to avoid them. Despite all our remarkable qualities, humans ignore our cultures and languages, and they mistreat and exploit us. This must stop. We must show humans that we are not things to be used and abused, but sentient beings with our own worth. Let's say to them, human beings, you have the power to positively impact all species in ways big and small, and it starts with treating us with understanding and compassion. Let's imagine a world where our habitats are protected and our rights to be ourselves is respected. This can be our world, but it requires each human to take responsibility for their actions and make choices that respect the well-being of all living, feeling beings. Humans, please listen to us. We want to share this planet with you and live in peace. Please, stop experimenting on us. Stop eating us. Stop wearing us. Stop forcing us into circuses and loud stadiums full of screaming fans. Stop locking us in cages. Stop putting us in chains. Stop hunting us. Stop murdering us for our body parts. We are asking you, our fellow inhabitants of this unique, bright blue planet, to leave today with renewed respect for all of us. Remember, we're all in this together. Thank you.
Edward James Olmos, the voice of the animals. The Council of Animals is in session at the National Mall in Washington, D.C. until September 3rd, 2023. The art was created by Washington State-based artist Quill Hyde and features a 7-foot-tall polar bear, a 1,200-pound elephant, a 6-foot-tall rhinoceros with a chicken on its back. At the council, you're asked to sign PETA's Declaration of Consciousness, inspired by the Cambridge Declaration on Consciousness, whereby the undersigned agree that every animal is a sentient individual being, living a life that is rich and meaningful to them. It is not necessary for an animal's anatomy to match that of a human being, for that animal to possess complex feelings, sensations, and experiences. There is overwhelming evidence that animals feel pain, love, joy, loneliness, and grief, and possess the desire for their own freedom. Animals also possess awareness, have social relationships, and deep familial bonds, and carry out purposeful actions. It is our duty to respect them and treat them with consideration for who they are. The Council of Animals will be at the National Mall from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. until September 3rd, 2023. It's located between the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum and the National Gallery of Art. The closest street address is 655 Jefferson Drive, Southwest. Please come and sign the Declaration on Consciousness. You can also sign PETA's Declaration on Consciousness online at PETA.org. And that's our show for today. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to send a link of this show to your friends. Tell them you like the PETA Podcast. Contact us at PETA.org. You can find me on Twitter at Emil Amok. That's EMILAMOK. Or see my vlog at AMOK.com. Or see my work at ALDEF, the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund. That's ALDEF, AALDEF.org/blog. Or get this podcast on YouTube at Emil Amok 1. Once again, thank you for listening. Check out all our episodes on your favorite podcast app or on Apple Podcasts, where you can subscribe to as well as rate and review the show. It helps get the word out about the issues you care about. Our music is provided by Carbonworks. Check them out on YouTube. And join us again next time for more insight into animal rights and the fight for a cruelty-free world on the PETA Podcast. I'm Emil Guillermo.